Welcome to the Humble Warrior podcast, the show that helps selfless high achievers who think they're still not good enough use their imposter syndrome to create a life they're absolutely in love with. Today, we're going to be talking about gratitude, which, honestly, I struggled with this when I was younger because I'm a naturally grateful person, but I would roll my eyes when people talked about it because I wasn't experiencing that magic that they were referring to. But the reality is, I was using gratitude in the wrong way. And yes, there is such a thing. Today, we're going to talk about why your gratitude practice may not produce the desired effect and some reframes to get you on your way to creating that pinch me life that you absolutely deserve. Because true gratitude is the only way to get there. So, why might gratitude not be working for you? Number one, you're trying to use gratitude as a mood fixer instead of a truth finder. Gratitude in and of itself isn't meant to replace difficult things. It's meant to sit beside them. So if you're using it to force positivity, your system may resist. Try something like, I'm grateful for X and I'm still feeling Y. And this actually reminded me of when I was much younger and I was following Oprah's lead. I wanted to live Oprah's life, right? She was impactful. She had this amazing platform and show. I felt all the feels and she did all these magical things and her star was rising. She was a billionaire, is a billionaire, right? And she always talked about gratitude and intention are the two things that she used to create that life. And so when I did it, I got my little journal. I did my 3 gratitude things every single day, just like she said. I honestly felt empty and inadequate and like I was doing it wrong. And the reality was that I abandoned that gratitude practice because it just didn't feel like it was working. And it wasn't until many years later that I decided I had to discover what gratitude meant to me, not follow someone else's lead. Not that Oprah's doing it wrong. She's amazing. But I think the point is, especially when you're someone who's experiencing imposter syndrome, we often try to fit into the mold that the world says we should. But you have to find your mold and understand how you operate so that you can fully exist in line with your values, your purpose, and that's when the magic happens, right? And one of the easiest ways for me to get started with this practice was actually with my body because it's a very tangible thing, right? I don't necessarily have to be super in my head about it. I have something physical that I can look at and kind of examine. And this was after I had left the anti exploitation space. I was very severely burned out. My spirit was pretty broken. My body was broken as well. And I remember intuitively understanding that I had to start somewhere in terms of healing whatever it was that I was experiencing. And I had gained about 30 pounds during that unit tenure. And while the mission was amazing, I can look back now and still recognize that I had really abused myself in order to accomplish the mission. And thankfully now I don't do that anymore. But I remember hearing my therapist say, you need to look in the mirror and really examine yourself and decide what parts of yourself you actually like. And I was looking in the mirror, and first of all, it was really weird because I'd never looked at myself in the mirror. Like I'd never looked at myself in the eyes. And so it was really strange, sort of seeing myself for the first time. But when I scanned my body, I didn't see anything that I really liked. And that was a really sad realization for me, first and foremost. The fact that I knew I was an imperfect person, but I was still a good person, I thought. And I couldn't even see one thing about myself that I liked. And I had to sit there and really kind of squint and not just say something for the sake of saying something that I'm grateful for, but really truly mean it. And I had to come back to who I've always been, right? And that is the truth of who I am. So I had to come back to this understanding that I'm a human who is worthy of loving herself because I wasn't, right? And in order to do that, I had to start with the truth of who I thought I was. So as I'm looking at my body, I'm seeing belly fat, I'm seeing cellulite, I'm seeing gray hairs, I'm seeing all kinds of crazy things, which actually brings us to our second truth in terms of why gratitude might not be working for you. You're trying to practice gratitude while you're dysregulated. So, if you're overwhelmed or anxious, the nervous system cannot receive gratitude in that deep way that you want. So, you need to regulate your nervous system first and then return to gratitude. And when I was doing the scan and looking at my body and seeing all of the things I didn't like about my body, there was this knowing deep inside me that kind of told me, your body has been with you your entire life. Like literally, it doesn't matter what you do, where you go, your body's always there with you. And in that moment, my relationship with my body completely changed. Prior to that, in order to cope with the stress of working the cases, I was overeating, which was a new tactic I had never picked up before. I was drinking too much. I was way overworking because, again, my imposter was saying that my value hinged on what I could produce. And even though I had abused my body in all kinds of crazy ways, I wasn't sleeping very well, right? My body never let me down. And I am so lucky that my body has never had, knock on wood, any kind of major medical situation. She's always just been really, really strong, and I've never even broken a bone. And she's done some crazy things, right? And I just had to sit and acknowledge that this body of mine was my ride or die, and I just hadn't been very nice to it. And that was actually a really relieving thought. And it also made me really sad. I actually had to ask my body for forgiveness, which sounds kind of weird, but it was this beginning of a relationship where it was a true connection between my head and my heart and my body and getting all of those aligned. And so it was just honestly, now that I'm reflecting on it, a really sweet moment of, guys, everything about our creation is magnificent and incredible. And so often in pursuing achievement, we forget how amazing our bodies are. And I just hope that this reminds you that he or she has always been with you. And I hope that you're loving it a little bit more today. So, point number 3, you're aiming for big gratitude instead of small truths, right? So, we kind of expect, or I expected, that gratitude would be this really big, sweeping, kind of emotional thing. I'm just like, I'm so grateful for my life. I'm so grateful to be American. I'm so grateful for all these things. And while they were true in my head, I didn't feel it in my heart. And over time, as I've practiced different forms of gratitude, what I have discovered is that it's the small truths or the micro gratitudes that actually work best. So, sharing a drink with somebody that you care about, a really kind gesture from a stranger, a moment of quiet where you can connect with yourself. Small truths actually land a lot more easily. When I can sit in the morning and have a cup of coffee to get centered for my day, rather than waking up and being immediately run ragged by a job that doesn't feel like it appreciates me, to me, that is real gratitude. That I am so grateful that God gave me this life, and also that I had the courage to take one step at a time in co-creating that life with God. And it's been a whole journey of trials, but it was so worth it. And I know it'll be worth it for you, right? And I really want you guys to be honest about these micro gratitudes should not be platitudes. They're not paying lip service to try to get to a point of feeling better. If it's not true, I don't want you to say it and I don't want you to experience it because you're just lying to yourself. Okay. We want to start with the most basic truths. And actually, I think with my body, I started with my shoulders. I was like, my shoulders are kind of cute. And it was really weird because I'm like, well, they're not terrible, is kind of where I landed. And over time, I mean, several years later, I was walking past a mirror in the bedroom and I saw my figure and I was like, ooh, I'm cute. Like, look at that booty. And I was just reflecting on the massive shift that I had made just through this process of micro gratitudes. And I couldn't tell you when the shift happened, but it did. And once you have a process that works for you, it's much easier to replicate that across other areas of your life. But what's important is understanding what works for you and what your truth is, right? So, reason number 4 why a traditional gratitude practice might not be working for you is you're in a season of depletion. If you're exhausted, if you're in grief, if you're experiencing trauma or stress, it can absolutely swallow gratitude. And all of this means you're depleted, not ungrateful. Okay. So there's a really big difference between I'm tired and I'm ungrateful. And knowing the difference is really important. So if you shift to a simple acknowledgement of, I'm not ungrateful, I'm just depleted, that could be really powerful in you actually getting to that space of gratitude that you want. And actually, depletion, as we know, is one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome. So it's very common. And if you're experiencing this, congratulations, you are experiencing the same thing that 70% of the population does. And it's incredibly common. So you're pouring yourself out. And when you're in survival mode, because you've poured too much out, your body really has a hard time accessing those intuitive creative spaces, right? The body in and of itself is designed perfectly. So everything that you're experiencing or anything that is happening to you, it's actually happening because you created that, which I know is a really difficult circumstance. And I am including things that are out of your control that happen to you, but it's how you respond to those things that indicates the quality of your life, right? And so when our body's in survival mode, we are really cocooning and going down to, is my heart pumping? Do I have food? Do I have shelter? Do I have community? Am I going to die? And when we're in survival mode, the brain actually is not able to access those really creative spaces, right? Those are on the opposite end of the emotional spectrum. You have to be in peace, joy, and passion flow state kind of space to experience creative energy. And so once again, it goes back to acknowledging I'm not ungrateful. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just tired or I'm experiencing grief. And you just have to let those things flow. Point number 5, gratitude may actually be bumping up against an unspoken pain for you. So, this is another really big one that comes up a lot. So, if resentment, loss, or unmet needs are not acknowledged, your gratitude is not going to take root, right? It doesn't matter how hard you try to be grateful, it's not actually going to have those deep roots that you really want into your heart and your spirit. And the way to resolve that is to actually name the truth in order to open the space for that true gratitude. And resentment often indicates busted boundaries. So when someone is doing something that violates our values as a person or the sanctity of our being, when we don't address those situations, it will create resentment within us. And it's easy to project the resentment out towards someone else. But if you're experiencing resentment, it's because you allowed the behavior or you didn't address the negative behavior to your satisfaction, right? And so oftentimes with imposter syndrome, since the inner imposter is saying that you're not good enough for some reason, it's often because you don't value yourself enough to set and or enforce boundaries and communicate those boundaries to other people. And this is incredibly common for my listeners. I often tell people that are living in resentment when we're talking about boundaries that I would rather you feel guilty than resentful, because when you love people, it's a double-edged sword. Anytime you do anything to create any amount of discomfort in other people, you don't want that, right? But unfortunately, what that means is you're often absorbing behaviors that do not support you, and your brain is kind of making it out in a way where you're like, well, I have to do this in order to maintain the friendship or live the best version of myself, but that's not true. So you deserve to have boundaries in place and you deserve to honor those boundaries. And here's the other thing is your problem is you're smart. Humble warriors are highly analytical thinkers. They're very intuitive. You understand how to read rooms. You can come up with plans. You're the master to-do list person. And you know that you think things through all the time for other people. But when it comes to your basic needs, you put your stuff at the bottom, right? That's the point of being so service oriented. It's about everybody else winning and you losing. And there's all kinds of stuff out there on boundaries. Boundaries are incredibly powerful for people who are experiencing imposter syndrome. But my favorite way to describe it is, I think it was Brene Brown that talked about boundaries are kind of like a fence, but not just a fence, a fence with a door. You're letting the good in and you're keeping the bad out. So when you're able to acknowledge and communicate what those boundaries are, you're actually opening the door for deeply felt gratitude because you're keeping the unhealthy stuff that is creating unspoken pain for you out. Okay. I know this is deep stuff. So if you guys have any questions, please put a comment on the feed or shoot me an email at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Point number 6. So after we've addressed our unspoken pain and set and enforced boundaries, oftentimes the gratitude practices that we've learned don't match our wiring. So journals and lists don't actually work for everybody, right? Oprah did her, I start my journal every day with 3 things I'm grateful for. And I did that and it just didn't work for me. You might need sensory, relational, movement-based, or truth-based gratitude instead. So for example, putting your toes in the grass makes me feel really grateful. Being among the trees is something that a few of my clients have mentioned just makes them feel super grateful. When you're spending time with people that you really, really love, you feel more a sense of gratitude for having made time for that connection, right? When you go to the gym and you're working out on the treadmill or lifting weights, right? You might be really grateful to yourself for making that time for yourself to love on your body. Or you might even use the gym as a place to vent, right? And in that way, what you're actually doing is you're releasing unspoken pain, which was point 5, right? And so in this way, that physical movement might actually create the space for that gratitude to come in. Other ways that work for me, lighting candles. My husband totally laughs at me because depending on what's going on, he's like, why do you have a seance going on? Like, I love lighting candles. It's a very sensory calming experience for me. And it just helps me feel gratitude, right? Light actually reminds me of all the physics of light, which I've talked about in past podcast episodes. But when I feel darkness overwhelming me, I remember that darkness can never overcome light. When you are light, you are looking out in darkness. And so it feels like the darkness is all around you, but the reality is that you are the light. And so when I think about the physics of how God set up the interplay of darkness and light, that brings me gratitude knowing that darkness will never win, right? So much gratitude when I think about that. Music is another really big one. Music for me has a way of expressing thoughts and emotions that I can't cognitively bring to the surface. So I have an op mix for when I'm doing operations and I'm really in my imposter process and I'm scared of messing up and letting the teams down and the people we're called to serve down. And I have a playlist of songs that it doesn't matter how many times I listen to them, they speak to a certain truth that I'm experiencing. And I'm just able to connect with these people that I've never met in my life, right? And because of their words and their experiences, I have deep gratitude that they're able to put words to something that I'm feeling right now. And so, again, going back to what actually matches your wiring in terms of how you really practice deep gratitude. I have another client, she's really big into herbalism. And oh my gosh, I honestly, much like my career in coaching, initially when somebody suggested I be a coach, I was like, is that a real job? Herbalism, I always kind of thought it was this frou-frou thing. No. Go to an herbalist event, you guys. It is mind-blowingly amazing. The teas and the essential oils and all these incredible things that they come up with to help enhance our lives. And I'm just constantly fascinated by what people bring to the table. But this one client, she feels super attuned and connected and in gratitude when she's doing her herbalist stuff. So we've talked about how to maximize that, right? Because she's got to fill her cup. And so we covered today 6 reasons why your standard gratitude practice might not be working. You're trying to use gratitude as a mood fixer instead of a truth finder. 2, you're trying to practice gratitude while dysregulated. 3, you're aiming for big gratitude instead of small truths. 4, you're in a season of depletion. 5, gratitude may be bumping up against unspoken pain. And 6, the gratitude practices you've learned don't match your wiring. And so, guys, on this Thanksgiving Day, 2025, I'm so thankful that I get to learn these lessons with you to shorten your timeline to experiencing deep gratitude. Because when you actually experience these truths and you put them into practice, you will feel in your body the depth. Like in my chest, I can feel it. My thriving, my joy is so much deeper and more encompassing because I'm practicing these elements in a way that is true to who I am as an individual. I'm not denying my experience, I'm not denying my difficulty. And in fact, that is the path to getting us to live our very best lives. Because of this gratitude practice, my life has honestly completely changed. I have created a life and career that really is pinch me. And honestly, we're getting ready for 2026 and talking through, hey, what does it look like to create our next evolution of impact and joy and connection? And if I'm really honest, it was a little bit scary having that first conversation with my husband and my loved ones about what that actually looks like. But we have to be courageous and not fear our success, because when we are successful, we subconsciously give other people permission to be successful as well. And my hope for you this Thanksgiving is success, as I define it, is connection to God, connection to ourselves, connection to our community. And I am very, very grateful for this community and for you. I'm wishing you the happiest of Thanksgivings. I love you guys so much. So, so proud of you. If you like this episode, please share it with somebody that you're grateful for. And otherwise, if you want to discover more about yourself, you can check out my life purpose exercise freebie on my website, mightysparrowcoaching.com. Or you can check out my book, The Least of Us: How Your Imposter Syndrome Points to Your Greatest Power, available at all major book retailers. And until next time, Humble Warriors, please remember the world needs who you are made to be. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey to discover how you can harness your imposter to work for you.